Caleb stood in the dim glow of the hallway light, the soft hum of the city filtering through the cracks around the door of Jasper's apartment. It had been years since he'd knocked here unannounced, not physically, but emotionally. Deployment had changed everything, the things he'd seen, the things he'd become. Yet here he was, standing at Jasper's threshold, fingers trembling slightly as he pressed the doorbell. The familiar chime echoed like a heartbeat in his chest, both a promise and a threat. Would Jasper welcome this sudden intrusion, or would the years of distance and silence keep him locked away, even behind a familiar door? The peephole slid open, and for a brief moment, Caleb's breath caught. There were the hazel eyes behind the round glasses, the sandy blonde hair cropped short, the subtle dimple that appeared every time Jasper smiled, which in this moment was tentative and cautious. "Caleb," Jasper breathed out, the name carrying a weight that made his throat tighten. Without hesitation, he opened the door wider, enough for Caleb to slip inside the sanctuary that had been his for years. The apartment smelled the same old books, brewing coffee, and something else, something elusive that Caleb couldn't quite place a trace of home, maybe. The walls, lined with framed photos and abstract art, witnessed their reunion silently, the muted city noise beyond the window creating a halo of quiet that wrapped around them like a cloak. Caleb's hands found Jasper's arms, pulling him into a hug that was a mixture of relief and restraint. Their embrace was tight, too tight, and yet they both held back, caught in a fragile moment, suspended between years lost and possibilities unknown. The faint scar along Caleb's left cheekbone brushed against Jasper's temple, a mere touch that spoke silently of battles fought and endured. "I thought you were still deployed," Jasper whispered, his voice cracked with disbelief, threading through the pause that stretched between them. Caleb exhaled slowly, the tension leaking from his shoulders in a way he hadn't realized he'd been holding it. "I got out early, came back when I could." His words were grounded and simple, but beneath them lay a complexity neither was ready to unravel yet. He looked at Jasper's face, marked by time and change, but unmistakably familiar. "I didn't want to surprise you like this." Jasper shook his head, a small, tight smile pulling at the corner of his lips. "I guess, after all this time, surprise isn't the right word for it anymore." The apartment around them felt alive, filling the space between them with memories carried in the creak of the wooden floor, the soft flicker of a solitary lamp on the side table. They moved deeper inside, a mutual but unspoken agreement to step into a world where the past was a fragile backdrop to the present. Though each had built walls, neither wanted to hurt the other. Not tonight. Jasper reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Caleb's forehead, his hand lingering like a question posed in silence. The storm cloud of unspoken emotions hung heavy, yet somehow the familiar warmth of their connection softened the edges of this unexpected reunion. The city outside dimmed, streetlights blinking in imitation of distant stars, and they stepped toward the living room, the quiet shelter of Jasper's apartment, making space for what might come next. As Caleb settled onto the worn couch, Jasper moved to the small kitchenette, the soft clinking of glass filling the room as he reached for bottles and poured 2 drinks with care. The amber liquid caught the light, warming up the gloom that had settled between them since Caleb's arrival. With a tentative smile, Jasper handed a glass across to Caleb, the gesture simple but weighted with care. "To coming home," Jasper said, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable tremor beneath the surface. "To coming home," Caleb echoed, raising his glass halfway before his eyes met Jasper's. The clink of their glasses was a muted promise, a fragile anchor in the swirling sea of emotions around them. They drank, slowly savoring the burn and the comfort alike. The first words fell like cautious stepping stones across a river neither was confident to cross. "So, how long exactly were you back?" Jasper asked, searching Caleb's face for hints beyond the words. Caleb leaned back, eyes drifting to the ceiling, a moment recalling the nights alone under foreign stars. "A few weeks." I kept it quiet, needed to get my bearings before I told anyone. You could have told me, Jasper whispered, a note of hurt threading through his tone. The way he said it suggested more than just missed communication. It was the gap of distance, the hidden battles, the places Caleb had kept locked away, places Jasper wanted to understand, but hadn't been invited to enter. Caleb's jaw tightened as the words landed. I didn't want to drag you into it. Deplacation isn't easy to explain. And you wouldn't have understood, and it felt safer keeping it between me and the ghosts. Jasper's hand flexed on the armrest, his gaze unwavering. Try me. The room seemed to hold its breath. Neither dared push too hard, but the barrier was cracking, revealing soft fissures beneath years of casual camaraderie and unspoken truths. The storm outside picked up then, the first distant rumbles, echoing against the window panes, the rain tracing quiet rivulets down the glass. Jasper's voice dropped, quieter now. You know it wasn't the same here without you. The city felt emptier, like a part of it was missing. Caleb's eyes flickered, a mixture of shame and something almost like hope blooming in their depth. That's not something you say often. Maybe I should, Jasper admitted, his lips curving in a ghost of a smile. Look, I'm not great with feelings or whatever, but not hearing from you. The silence was harder than any distance. They sat there, the storm growing louder around them, thunder punctuating their fragile conversation. The kettle whistled softly in the background, a domestic soundtrack to a night that had begun with a simple knock but was quickly shaping into something far more complicated. Caleb swallowed, leaning forward, his voice barely above a whisper. I guess I missed this too, us before everything got messy. Messy? Jasper echoed, a brow arched. You, the soldier? You've always been clean-cut. Straight shooter, through and through. Caleb chuckled, running a hand through his dark hair, dishevelled from weeks in the field. Things aren't always what they seem, Jasper. War messes with your head. And maybe, just maybe, it messes with who you think you are. Jasper's eyes studied him, searching behind that faint scar, the lean muscle beneath the uniform, for the real man who had just walked through his door. You're not the same Caleb I knew, he said softly, and maybe neither am I. That's true, Caleb agreed. But maybe we can figure out these new parts together. A pause stretched between them, a moment suspended in the warm glow of the lamp. Outside, the wind rattled the window frames, and rain drummed a steady rhythm, as though nature itself was urging them to listen. To each other, to the truth that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. They talked then, cautiously at first, words weaving between memories and what-ifs. Jasper recounted small victories and quiet struggles at home, his attempts to keep the apartment alive in Caleb's absence, his nights spent thinking about how different everything felt without him. Caleb shared stories too of the desolate beauty of foreign landscapes, the weight of nights spent watching over comrades, and the ever-present hum of uncertainty that had become his constant companion. With every word, the distance between them faded a little more. The storm outside became a comfort rather than a threat, its sound blending with the soft cadence of their rekindled connection. They laughed quietly at shared jokes, and at times silences slipped comfortably between words filled with meaning. Neither was quite ready to voice aloud. At one point, Jasper's hand brushed Caleb's, a fleeting contact loaded with significance. Neither pulled away, neither reached further. But the gesture lingered like a question, poised on the edge of answers, delicate, urgent, and impossible to ignore. The night deepened around them, the city slowing down beneath layers of rain and shadow. The apartment felt alive now, infused with a cautious hope and tentative trust they were both daring to rebuild. Caleb looked at Jasper, green eyes catching the soft light, searching for the courage to say what he'd kept buried for too long. Maybe this night would be a turning point. Or maybe the dawn would come too soon, blurring the edges of their fragile truths back into shadows. But for now, there was only this. Two men, once friends, now something more, navigating the tangled terrain of new beginnings amid the ruins of old fears. And as the storm raged around them, they both knew one thing with quiet certainty. Neither of them wanted this night to end. The storm had been relentless for hours, its fierce chorus punctuated by the occasional distant crack of thunder rolling through the city's empty streets. The rain's insistent drumming against the window pane had morphed from an unsettling nuisance into a kind of distant lullaby, a steady rhythm underscoring the fragile intimacy that had quietly taken root in Caleb's apartment. The air between them was thick, unspoken hopes, fears, and truths pressing closer with every breath. It felt like the night was holding its breath with them. Then, without warning, the lights flickered once, twice, then gave up entirely. The buzzing hum of the electricity died, swallowed by sudden darkness. The modern cityscape outside their window blinked out, a blanket of muted shadows falling over every familiar shape. Caleb's green eyes adjusted slowly to the dark, his hand moving instinctively to the small cluster of candles he'd kept in a kitchen drawer for emergencies. He found a matchbox, fingers fumbling just slightly, an uneven kind of nervousness jittering below the surface, and struck a match that sputtered to life. The tiny flame warmed to a steady glow, blossoming light in the obsidian quiet. He held the candle steady on the coffee table, its flickering flame casting fragile tendrils of amber and gold across Jasper's face. The round glasses caught the flame's light and reflected something soft and alive in his warm hazel eyes. Shadows danced along the angles of his lean face, the familiar dimple beside his modest smile. Neither of them spoke in the first moments after the lights surrendered to darkness. It was as if the power outage had drained more from the apartment than just electricity. It had swallowed any lingering pretense or hesitation. The quiet settled like a dense, sumptuous velvet curtain draped over everything. Caleb could smell the faint scent of rain washing through the open window, the muggy earthiness seeping in with each heavy gust of wind. Their bodies gravitated without conscious command, closing the distance that had always seemed impossible before tonight. The space between their chairs narrowed until the faintest touch of calf against calf was a small lake wrapping around them both. Jasper's fingers curled slightly, resting on the armrest, close enough now that if Caleb reached, he could brush them, could cross the line that neither had dared to approach. Caleb met his gaze without breaking, deep green eyes locking with warm hazel, the flammalight pooling between them like some sacred tether. In that dim glow, the world shrank to the two of them. Two soldiers of different wars, worn in different ways, caught in a moment that dared not be named, yet shouted in silent, urgent pulses beneath their skin. Time lost meaning. The seconds stretched and folded into each other. Every breath held, every blink, a fraught decision. Caleb's heart hammered, not with fear, but with a fragile hope, pounding against ribs as if to remind him that he was still alive, still human, still capable of feeling something utterly raw beneath the everyday armor he'd built over the years. Jasper's breath caught just slightly, and his lips parted as if on the verge of speech, but doomed to silence. That tiny hesitation echoed, louder than any shouted confession. Caleb's mind reeled with everything he wanted to say, and everything he dared not. At last Jasper broke the silence, his voice a low whisper, rich with curiosity and something far softer. "Tell me about it." The deployment. There was no demand in the words, only an offering, a fragile invitation. Caleb's body stiffened, a subtle steel settling into his spine, a reflex honed from years of shutting down, building walls. He swallowed hard, the candlelight flickering across the faint scar on his left cheekbone, a pale map of battles, fought both inside and out. It was. His voice faltered, strangled by memories better left locked away. Different than I thought it would be. The words were careful and measured, but there was a crack that wasn't there before. End. A tremor in the armor. Jasper leaned forward slightly, eyes never leaving Caleb's, a silent anchor in the storm. How so? Caleb shrugged. A motion that didn't quite hide the weight pressing on his broad shoulders. The heat. The dust. The endless routine of waiting for something to happen, but never really knowing when or if it would. His gaze drifted down to the flickering candle, thoughts unraveling beneath the surface. He tried desperately to control. It all makes you question what you're even doing there. Sometimes it feels like you're an extra in someone else's story, Jasper nodded slowly, an understanding settling in his frame. Did it change you? Yeah. The word came out stripped bare and raw. I didn't think I would come back. Caleb's laugh was humorless, bruised by the shadows of the past months. Not really. I'm not even sure how to be home anymore, like maybe there isn't a way back to the guy I was before. Or maybe it's just that no one's the same after this kind of thing. The flicker of the candlelight emphasized the vulnerability behind Caleb's green eyes. It revealed the fractures, the battles waged within, the quiet cracks in the facade. For the first time in a long time, his defenses slipped. The strong soldier, the dependable friend, they both fell away, leaving only a man who was afraid. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. Not about the danger back there, but about fitting back in here. I don't know if old places and old people can hold the new me, or if they even want to. Jasper's own breath softened, a gentle exhale that seemed to carry the weight of his empathy. The dim glow bathed his face in a softness that words couldn't capture. There was no need to fix or offer solutions. What Caleb needed was permission to be seen, scars and all. I'm here, Jasper said simply, voice steady like a quiet river. No judgments, just presence. If that's okay, Caleb blinked, unaccustomed to such quiet, unwavering support. It flickered through him, a warmth that didn't burn but melted a little of the icy grip in his chest. Yeah, he murmured. Yeah, that's okay. They sat suspended in that fragile understanding. Outside, the storm showed no sign of relenting, but inside the apartment, the darkness no longer felt threatening. Instead, it was a cocoon, a place held in delicate balance between past pain and hesitant hope. Jasper shifted, rubbing the back of his neck in that familiar, self-conscious way Caleb had come to know. You never told me much, back when you left. I guess I didn't really know how to ask, how to listen. You didn't have to. Caleb's voice was quiet, but resolute. I'm not proud of most of it. I didn't want to drag it into this. His eyes flicked up, meeting Jasper's again, lingering in the space where secrets hovered like fragile glass ornaments, beautiful and dangerous. But maybe this time is different. Jasper's smile was small but real, a crack in his usual reserve. It reached his eyes, lighting them with something warm and reassuring. I hope so. Then, after a beat, because I needed to see you, not the soldier you were, not even the friend you've been, just you. Caleb's throat tightened, a mixture of gratitude and unexpected tenderness, rising unbidden from some deep well inside him. For years he had trained himself to be distant, to shield the parts of himself that felt broken or soft. But sitting here in the smoky candlelight, breathing in the scent of rain and the quiet strength of this man beside him, he felt those walls falter. It's good to see you, Caleb said after a long pause, voice breaking slightly with emotion he wasn't prepared for. Maybe the best part of all this. A silence fell again. But it was less heavy now, less filled with things left unsaid, and more with things understood without words. The night outside pressed on relentlessly, but inside the apartment, time seemed to slow to a languid calm. Caleb found himself watching Jasper's face. The way the soft light caught the subtle curve of his cheekbone, the twitch of the dimple as he smiled faintly, the way his hazel eyes held steady like a beacon in the dark. He could smell the faint hint of cigarette smoke clinging to Jasper's jacket, mixed with the fresh, clean scent of rain seeping through the cracked window. How long do you think you'll stay? Jasper asked softly, his fingers finally moving, stretching just enough so the backs of their hands touched. The contact was light, but electric, grounding, and fragile all at once. Caleb's chest tightened, but the answer came without hesitation, a whisper of truth. He was only just allowing himself to own. As long as you'll let me. The candle flickered again, sending shadows tumbling across the room. A reminder of the uncertainty ahead, the fragile edges of this night, this connection. But for the first time, Caleb felt like something he'd lost in the dust, and fire was beginning to grow again. Maybe dawn would come too soon. Maybe the light would reveal all the complexities waiting in the daylight, the fears clawing back to the surface. But for now, the darkness was theirs, a shared refuge where the quiet music of two hearts learning to beat together was the only sound. And in that darkness, without pretense or apology, Caleb and Jasper sat close enough now that the space between them held nothing but the weight of possibility. The storm raged outside, but here inside, a different kind of storm was quieting into something new, something gentle and fierce enough to hold them both. The sky cracked suddenly, a thunderclap that ripped through the room like a gunshot. The sound was so close, so sharp and violent, that Caleb's body jerked instinctively. Without conscious thought, he moved closer to Jasper, the small movement leaving no space between them now. His shoulder brushed against Jasper's arm, the warmth of his skin like a promise, palpable and undeniable. The electricity that had hummed lightly before surged into something more intense, anchoring Caleb with a fierce, nearly overwhelming clarity. Jasper's breath hitched softly, the tension in his chest rising as his fingers faltered on the blankets. Neither of them spoke. The thunder rolled again, distant but insistent, rumbling beneath the quake of the first. Tip! That one sharp noise had pulled everything taut between them, exposed something raw and unspoken. Caleb's heart hammered loud enough that he thought maybe Jasper would hear it, pounding against his ribs with the weight of a confession he wasn't ready to voice. He could feel the heat radiating from Jasper, small but real, like a pulse under his skin, an uncharted territory beneath the familiar. The scent of damp earth and rain mixed with the faint tang of tobacco on Jasper's clothes, tangled with the musky warmth of the apartment. Time slowed, stretched out in the space between stolen touches and silent understanding. Jasper's eyes lifted slowly, locking with Caleb's searching. There was no question in them, no hesitation, but neither was there an answer. It was a look that dared him to admit the shift while holding the fragile shelter of what had always been between them. Their history, their friendship, the safety of the past, felt suddenly fragile, as if the loud thunder might shatter the frame they'd built and leave them both exposed to a truth they hadn't yet named aloud. Caleb swallowed hard, his throat surprisingly dry. The warmth pooled in his chest wasn't just the heat from Jasper's nearness. It was something deeper, something fierce and complicated, that tangled in his veins like quiet fire. The proximity that had once only brought comfort now carried a new weight, pressing heavy against his ribcage. He wanted to reach, to touch more, but the earlier ease had vanished, replaced by an awareness that changed everything. A weak smile, tentative and trembling, curved at the corner of Jasper's lips. It was a silent admission that he felt it too, the pulse beneath the calm. He shifted slightly, fingers still wrapped lightly around the fabric of the blanket, as if steadying himself against the same storm that Caleb held within. Neither moved to pull away. Instead, the space between them, the invisible border that had protected their friendship for so long, wavered, melted, and finally dissolved. It wasn't a sudden collision or a leap, but a quiet folding in, a mutual drawing nearer that admitted an undeniable change had taken root. The storm outside might have been loud and shattering, but the one inside was a gentler tempest, sweeping through with a force that neither of them could deny. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain tapping softly against the cracked window pane, punctuated by the distant grumble of distant thunder moving on. The rest of the city was dark. Their apartment was a small, flickering refuge, where neither pretended this moment hadn't shifted everything. Jasper's fingers finally moved with deliberate care, brushing against Caleb's hand where it rested on the sheet. His touch was slow, almost reverent, a quiet encasing that made Caleb's breath catch in his throat. He held Caleb's hand gently between his own, thumbs stroking light circles over the knuckles. There was a vulnerability in the motion that made the world shrink down to just the two of them, to the soft pulse of life, beneath fingertips and skin. "I missed you," Jasper said suddenly, his voice low and unguarded, the words slipping free like secrets finally given permission to breathe. Caleb's heart skipped a beat, twice maybe, and the world tilted momentarily on its axis. The way the light caught the shimmer in Jasper's eyes, the faint curve of his mouth betraying the weight behind those simple words, it all felt devastatingly real, breaking through the carefully crafted walls of denial Caleb had built over the months apart. He wanted to say something, to tell Jasper that he missed him too, in ways that went beyond words, beyond even understanding. But the tangled threads of his own fears and uncertainties knotted tight in his chest, and the words wouldn't form. Instead, he just squeezed Jasper's hand back, a silent promise of the feelings too fragile to articulate, yet too fierce to hide. Jasper's gaze held steady, patient, and knowing, as if he understood the wars Caleb waged inside without needing them spelled out. "I thought about you all the time," he said softly, voice cracked with a mixture of longing and regret. "When I was out there, I kept hoping that it wouldn't just be a memory waiting for the light to fade, that maybe it could be something real again." Caleb swallowed hard, the breath catching tight in his throat. It wasn't just the months apart that had torn at him, it was the silence between what he'd wanted and what he thought was allowed. Jasper's hands holding his were a lifeline, tethering him to a possibility he'd been too scared to face. "I didn't know if you'd want me to stay," Caleb finally whispered, voice fragile but trembling with truth. "I wasn't even sure if I wanted to stay." "You don't have to decide yet," Jasper said gently, squeezing Caleb's hand with both of his own. "Not tonight, we have this moment, and that's enough for now. I'm here, Caleb." The sincerity in Jasper's words, the tenderness that cradled them both, unlocked something inside Caleb. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the quiet wash over him, the steady weight of Jasper's hand, the sound of rain, the slow beating of his own heart, finally syncing with another's. He stored it all away like a secret treasure, a whispered hope that maybe there was a way to navigate the storm between them. When he opened his eyes again, the walls around his heart felt just a little less impenetrable. The faint scar on his cheek tingled, alive with the heat of a touch that was no longer just friendship, but something far deeper, far more fragile and fierce all at the same time. Jasper's warm hazel eyes held his gaze steadily, a beacon in the dim light. Caleb exhaled slowly, the tight coil of confusion and longing, easing just enough to let something new take root, something real, something shared, something daring to reach beyond the boundaries they'd once set. "I'm glad you came home," he said quietly, voice barely above the rain tapping against the window. I think I've missed you too, more than I realized." Jasper's smile was small but full of light, the subtle dimple appearing as he leaned in just a fraction closer. "We have time," he said softly, "until dawn." And in that moment, the space between them wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the weight of everything they'd left unspoken, the fragile hope waiting in the darkness, and the quiet strength to face whatever light the morning might bring. The small kitchen was dim and warm, a single overhead bulb casting soft halos on the cluttered counter, where mugs waited like sentinels for the ritual of hot drinks. The rain drummed steadily against the window, the sound wrapped in the quiet hum of the city, settling into night's slower tempo. It was a place apart from the room they just left, The living room where silence had spoken volumes, where the air between them had felt taut and alive, with unsaid things. Caleb moved first, his steps measured, but infused with a tension that hadn't abated entirely. He glanced back over his shoulder to find Jasper's eyes lingering on his back, longer than necessary, a pull, an anchor, unspoken yet undeniable. The way Jasper watched him made his chest tighten, not from pain, but from something fragile, hopeful. With familiar easy motions, Jared no Jasper, he reminded himself internally, reached for the kettle. As he refilled it, the steam curling upward and blurring the edges of a long day, a long silence. Caleb's hands flexed slightly, the faint memory of a sharper friction from his uniform, a stark contrast to this softness. When Jasper caught his gaze, the hazel depths held a quiet intensity, and Caleb felt almost as if a thread was slipping loose, unraveling everything he thought he'd contained so carefully. "So," Caleb said suddenly, attempting a casual note that didn't quite land as light as intended, "you always did say coffee was the antidote to bad decisions. I guess tonight qualifies." The words came out rough, the shadow of a humor he hadn't accessed all night. Yanking a mug from the counter, he filled it, the dark liquid swirling like a temporary balm. Jasper's lips twitched at the edges, that subtle dimple deepening as he sent a small, warm smile. "Caleb's way. I thought it was wine," he teased, "or maybe bad decisions were just part of the fun." His voice carried a softness that seemed to draw the chill from the air. Caleb chuckled, the sound hesitant, but genuine unexpected relief, threading through it like sunlight breaking rain clouds. "Maybe you're right, but I'm not sure. Fun is how I described tonight, just yet." He sipped, eyes flickering away before catching Jasper's amused expression again. "I suppose if anyone could turn it into something close, it'd be you." The laughter that followed was sudden, like a release valve that didn't know it was waiting to pop. It was rough and uneven at first, but gaining momentum as the tension slackened in their muscles. Jasper's laugh was softer, more contained, but it filled the small kitchen with a warmth no heater or hot drink could match. To Caleb, it was like hearing a melody he'd forgotten he loved, sweet and familiar, but suddenly new. For a moment neither of them spoke, the echo of that shared laughter, lingering like a bridge rebuilt between them. Caleb's smile softened, and though his fingers curled tightly around the rim of his mug, the tension in his shoulders eased just an inch. "Thanks," Caleb said quietly, voice dipping low, "for this." For coming home, his eyes locked with Jasper's again, deeper now, sincere. "I don't know what I expected exactly, but it wasn't this, and maybe that's a good thing." Jasper's gaze softened even more, like sunlight after rain, and he took a slow sip of his drink before nodding. "Maybe it is." The kettle's whistle faded into the background as the rain's steady rhythm grew louder once more. They lingered side by side in the kitchen's cramped space, tethered by little more than eye contact, and the warmth from steaming mugs wrapped in two hands. Eventually, the magnetic gravity of the living room called them back to the swollen cushions and walls, still humming with the earlier exchange. The couch felt bigger now, yet somehow less lonely, with both of them sitting close enough that their knees brushed lightly, an unintended contact charged with quiet significance. Caleb settled in first, the weight of the night pressing softly on him. He took his mug to his lips, drinking, not really to taste the coffee but to summon courage. "I'm scared." The words broke free abruptly, jagged and unpolished, as if speaking them aloud might ground the spiraling thoughts tugging at his chest, not just of the war, not just the things I've seen out there, but coming back here, and... He stopped, gaze slipping away, unable to meet Jasper's steady one for a heartbeat. "And about how I feel, about you." The confession sat between them, fragile as a dropped needle on a vinyl record. Caleb's throat tightened, his fingers unconsciously tracing circles in the fabric of the worn blanket, draped over the couch arm. I don't know if this makes any sense to you, and maybe it just freaks you out. Maybe you don't feel the same. God, I don't even know what comes next. Jasper shifted his expression, folding gently into something softer, more open. The warmth in his eyes deepened until Caleb could feel it physically, as if it was rising, enveloping him in something safer than any battlefield he'd endured. Quietly, Jasper said, I felt the same way for a long time. I just didn't think you ever noticed. Caleb blinked. Universal disbelief painted across his face. You did. But I was scared too, Jasper admitted, voice low and earnest. Scared that telling you would ruin what we had, that it was just one-sided, that I'd lose you. Chudimur, more than that, I was scared that maybe I'd always want more and it wouldn't be enough. He pressed his palm lightly against Caleb's, a touch charged with long years of unspoken hope. But hearing you say that now, it doesn't make me want to run away. It makes me want to stay. Those words were like the first thaw in a harsh winter, unwinding months, maybe years, of tension so thick Caleb felt dizzy with relief. The air in the room seemed suddenly fuller, richer, and more intimate than the lonely spaces both men had inhabited before that night. Caleb's heart slowed from a frantic pace to something steady enough to believe in. I've missed this. Missed you. Maybe what I thought was just longing for home was something else, something I've been too scared to name. His voice cracked, honest with unguarded vulnerability. It feels like coming back to a place I never realized was home all along. Jasper's lips curved into a half-smile. Wah, the kind reserved for early mornings and second chances. We don't have to figure it all out right now. We just have to be honest with each other. His eyes searched Caleb's for a sign, a flicker of readiness. Caleb nodded, feeling the walls around him dissolve, piece by piece. Honest, he repeated softly. I can do that, as long as you're here. I'm here. Jasper's voice was steady, a promise wrapped in the quiet of the night and the soft glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. They sat like that in silence for a while, the rain's percussion a gentle reminder that even storms pass. Caleb's mind rewound through the months marked by absence and distance, the invisible wound that had scared him into silence, and then fast-forwarded into a future that suddenly seemed possible, one where the lines between friendship and something more weren't walls, but doorways. He looked at Jasper again, at the curve of his jaw, the way his hazel eyes caught the light, the shy confidence hidden behind those round glasses, and felt not fear, but a fluttering hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. You're not alone, he whispered, fingers tightening around Jasper's. A lifeline cast in the dark. And you never will be, Jasper replied, voice warm, like an anchor against the night. They leaned into that promise, the fragile, fierce beginning, humming quietly between them, as the rain softened and the city exhaled beneath a sky waiting for dawn. The storm had begun to weaken, its angry percussion on the window pane stepping down to a rhythmic patter, almost a sigh. The tension in the room followed suit, unwinding like a thread pulled gently through the eye of a needle. Caleb let out a breath. He hadn't realized he'd been holding the knot in his chest, loosening enough to speak the words tangled in his mind. I never thought I'd be here like this, he started, tipping his chin down as if speaking aloud made the admission less sharp. Saying all these things, feeling them. His fingers squeezed Jasper's just a little tighter, seeking some kind of anchor in the quiet. Jasper's hazel eyes didn't flicker away, they stayed steady, patient, unshakable. It's okay, he said softly. To feel, to wonder. Caleb swallowed against the lump that wasn't just emotion, but a confusion that had nested deep inside him over the years. I've always been labeled, straight. I haven't just told myself that I believed it, or I told myself it enough times that it felt true. But now, he struggled for the words, their weight tugging at him, breaking open old certainties. Now, I don't know if I do. Jasper nodded slowly, like the universe itself was shifting its axis just for this conversation. Labels are tricky, he said, voice low and sure. They're supposed to be a kind of shorthand, but sometimes they box us in instead. Caleb's gaze dropped to their intertwined hands, the stark contrast of skin and the faint scar on his cheek feeling less like a permanent marker and more like a map, worn but alive, open to new routes. I always thought love was one thing, and that was it. Easy, simple, straightforward as in, the gender of the person you're supposed to want. But maybe love doesn't care about those boxes. Maybe it just is. Jasper's lips curved into the faintest smile, one that softened the sharp edges of Caleb's uncertainty. Exactly. Love isn't about the labels we give it. It's about the people who give it meaning. But what if I'm wrong? Caleb's voice cracked slightly, honest and vulnerable. What if I'm just confused, or pretending to be something I'm not, because it feels safer right now? The words seemed to float in the space between them, and the answer came, not in a grand declaration, but in the way Jasper's eyes remained open and unjudging, full of a sincere kind of reassurance. Then that's okay too, he said quietly. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just have to be true to how you feel in this moment. I'm not here to rush you or push you. I'm here to walk beside you, wherever this goes. Caleb let his head fall back against the couch cushions, the familiar weight of fatigue mingling with a tentative peace. The rain's rhythm softened further. The storm's fury now, a mere whisper against the lull of the early morning. The air smelled like wet pavement and distant pines, and for a moment it felt as though the world had shrunk to this quiet bubble of fragile honesty. He looked over at Jasper again, his gaze tracing the soft shadows on the lean planes of his face, the way the glasses caught the now dim light, and the comforting steadiness in his warm hazel eyes. The past had been a tangle of assumed truths and silent denials. The future was a hazy expanse, not yet defined or framed, but now it shimmered with possibility. And in that soft, vulnerable truth, Caleb felt something blossom, a small, trembling hope that perhaps the stories they'd both believed were set in stone could be unwritten, rewritten. Jasper's voice dipped into the quiet. There's no script for this. And Han. We make it up as we go. Caleb let out a slow, shaky laugh, one of those sounds that's part relief and part disbelief. I think I like that. He looked back at their hands, then up to meet Jasper's gaze with something newfound, something earnest. Thank you for being here, for not walking away when it got complicated. Jasper's smile deepened, fingers brushing over Caleb's knuckles in a quiet caress. I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. The room, once filled with the storm's chaotic chorus, now settled into a delicate hush. The only sound was the soft creak of the old apartment and the steady, grounding presence of two souls, quietly bridging the distance that had long stretched between them. Later, as the sky slowly lightened, a pale wash of dawn slipped through the curtains. It seeped in gently, softening the edges of the room and painting everything in hues of gold and rose. The city beneath them still slept, muffled and calm, under the early morning calm. Caleb and Jasper sat across from each other on the worn floorboards, backs resting against the couch like two stray ships moored together in a harbour. Neither spoke. There were no words needed. What was between them now was quieter, deeper than language could reach. Caleb watched the way the morning light caught the strands of Jasper's hair, the softness around his eyes from a night spent awake, and felt a surge of something tender, protective. Here in the calm after the storm, time seemed to stretch and fold around them, a sacred pause where anything felt possible. He felt an unfamiliar sense of calm in the presence of someone who understood without needing explanations, who embraced the messy complexity of his truth instead of fearing it. The fear that usually clung to him, The fear of judgment, of rejection, of living trapped by expectations, felt distant, like a shadow cast behind a sun that was finally rising. Jasper's gaze found him again, the silent question hanging in the air. Caleb simply nodded. No promises, no assumptions, just the acknowledgement that maybe this fragile hope was something worth holding on to. They breathed in unison, the shared rhythm, a kind of quiet communion, the unspoken acknowledgement that neither of them had all the answers, but they had each other. And in the softness of that morning light, it was enough. The scent of coffee, rich and earthy, began to curl through the air as Caleb rose to rummage around the kitchen. Jasper stood beside him, hands dipping into the warmth of the moment without forcing it, a gentle presence that didn't demand but offered comfort. Caleb poured the dark liquid into 2 mugs, the sound stirring the morning air like a gentle pulse. He handed one to Jasper, fingers brushing, and that simple contact sent a ripple through both of them. No teasing, no games, just quiet acknowledgement of the growing bond that had taken root in the night's fragile confessions. They found themselves near the window, watching as the world slowly roused itself, rooftops glowing faintly in the soft light, trees swaying lightly in a breeze that carried the promise of renewal. For the first time in a long while, Caleb didn't feel like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, fearing the fall. He felt grounded, tethered by something real and unexpected. "Do you think this is a beginning?" His voice was tentative, a question as much to himself as to Jasper. Jasper's smile was patient, a beacon of quiet certainty. "I do. A beginning without guarantees, but with hope, and I think hope is exactly what we need." Caleb's fingers curled around his mug, warmth seeping into his skin, steadying the flutter in his chest. "I want that hope. Maybe even happiness." Jasper reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Caleb's ear, an intimate, tender gesture that felt like a quiet vow. "Then, let's find it together. One day, one moment at a time." The apartment filled with a soft golden light as the morning grew brighter, a promise shimmering in every sunbeam and every heartbeat shared between them. No grand declarations, no rushed confessions, just the gentle unfolding of something new, fragile, and fiercely alive. As the city whispered awake around their quiet sanctuary, Caleb felt the cautious stirrings of a future made, not by fitting into old labels, but by creating new spaces. Spaces where love could grow in unexpected forms, where confusion could settle into clarity, and where 2 souls once shadowed by fear. In those moments, with the dawn stretching wide and the world fresh and full of possibility, Caleb understood that coming home was no longer just about where his feet landed, but about where his heart dared to go. And with Jasper beside him, he was ready to step forward, into the unknown, into the light, into whatever this new love would become. Caleb's hand moved almost on its own, brushing slowly over Jasper's shoulder, with a gentleness that felt almost reverent. It was a simple touch, tender and unassuming, like the whisper of a breeze across quiet water. The warmth of his palm against the fabric of Jasper's worn sweatshirt carried a silent promise one, of presence, of care, and of unwavering support. Neither of them needed to say it aloud. The touch spoke volumes in its quiet eloquence. Jasper's breath caught softly, the subtle tremor beneath Caleb's hand reflecting a vulnerability, long hidden beneath layers of rigidity and fear. Jasper's lips curved into a shy, almost hesitant smile. There was an unfamiliar softness in his eyes that wasn't there before, a flicker of something more open, more trusting. It was as if, finally, the armor he'd worn since the first days of their friendship was slipping away, thread by thread, revealing the raw, tender skin underneath. To Caleb, this small smile held the weight of trust and the fragile hope of something new, blossoming, born from that silent promise of companionship. "You feel safe with me, don't you?" Caleb's voice was low, steady, not quite a question, but an invitation, an offering of that rare space where judgment didn't exist. Yeah, Jasper said, voice barely above a whisper, rich with relief, and something like awe, the intimacy of the moment. For the first time, in a long time, I think I do. Caleb's fingers lingered just a moment longer, memorizing the way Jasper's shoulder relaxed beneath his hand. It was so easy, in that quiet space between dawn and the waking world, to imagine this was how things were supposed to be, soft, patient, and full of unspoken understanding. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence, because silence no longer felt empty or uncomfortable. It felt safe. It felt like home. Jasper shifted slightly, leaning into Caleb's touch, in a way that had once been unthinkable. His hazel eyes caught the first golden light, reflecting warmth and hesitation intertwined. I never thought I'd get to this point, he admitted quietly, as though confessing a secret. I didn't even know it was possible. Caleb met his gaze, the deep green eyes steady with a fierce tenderness. Neither did I, he whispered. But sometimes, the unexpected gets you where you need to be. For a moment, they stayed like that, connected by little more than a look, a touch, and an unspoken vow. That moment felt infinite, a pocket of time suspended between the past and the future. On the periphery, the city hummed awake, but inside the apartment, time slowed and hearts beat a quieter rhythm, one patient enough to hold the weight of fragile hope. Jasper cleared his throat softly, breaking the stillness with something practical, something grounded. So, what happens next? His voice held a gentle urgency, the truthful, trembling desire to figure this out, to not just drift in the space between them, but to chart a course forward. Caleb exhaled slowly, choosing his words with care. We take it one day at a time, no promises I can't keep, no rush into something we're both not ready for. We build this piece by piece, brick by brick, with truth and patience. Jasper nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle comfortably, like a warm blanket around his shoulders. Okay, but what about everything else? You know, the outside world, the way people might see us, or not see us the way we want to be seen. The question hung heavy in the air, a tangible shadow that neither wanted to ignore. Caleb shifted, sliding an arm around Jasper's back, pulling him a little closer, anchoring them both. It's going to be complicated, Caleb admitted, voice low and earnest. People have preconceived ideas, labels, expectations. They'll try to fit us into boxes that don't quite fit. Jasper's hand found Caleb's under the sweatshirt, their fingers linking instinctively. Yeah, I'm still the straight soldier to most. And you? There's your own kind of label, sometimes a burden, sometimes a lifetime of careful silences. Caleb smiled wryly, a flash of that familiar guardedness returning briefly to his eyes. I'm still me. It just takes some of the weight off to know you're here, really here. That whatever comes, we face it together. They fell into a quiet rhythm, voices low, reflective, and full of the tentative hope that accompanies the first inklings of a shared future. Caleb talked about his reintegration, how the city no longer felt completely unfamiliar, but the world outside his apartment could be daunting in ways you can't prepare for until you're actually standing in it. The casual conversations that slipped into uncomfortable territory, the looks exchanged in restaurants or on the street, when Jasper appeared with him, hand in hand. There'll be questions, Caleb said. Some friendly, some ignorant, and maybe a few that sting. But I think we owe it to ourselves to be a little patient with those moments, and with each other. Jasper traced lazy circles on Caleb's forearm, savoring the physical connection that made those abstract challenges feel a little less daunting. And what about you? The army, your career, how will that fit? Caleb shrugged, the motion casual but thoughtful. I'm not sure yet. I want to keep going, but I might need to be more honest with myself, and even with them, than I ever was before. That takes courage, and I know it won't be easy. Jasper squeezed Caleb's hand, his own resolve hardening like tempered steel. Then we figure it out. Together. One step at a time. Pierre, One step at a time. I'm not going anywhere. Caleb's smile was soft, appreciation flickering in those green eyes. And you won't have to. I'll do my best not to run. They laughed, a short, genuine burst that cut through the lingering tension, like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was a sound neither of them remembered hearing for a long time, a sound that felt like a promise in itself. There was a pause, a breath, as Jasper let the gravity of their conversation settle inside him. Sometimes I worry about how my family will take this, he confessed, the vulnerability carefully guarded beneath layers of his words. Caleb's touch was steady, anchoring again. We don't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe we start by being honest with ourselves and with each other. The rest can come in time. Yeah, Jasper whispered, leaning in closer until their foreheads nearly touched. The warmth between them was magnetic, a force that pulled them together, despite the uncertainties that awaited outside these walls. We'll navigate the noise, we'll make our own definitions, and we'll protect this, whatever it becomes. Caleb's breath hitched, a tender shiver passing through him. That's all I want. The city outside continued its slow awakening, the traffic beginning to stir, voices and footsteps faintly echoing against the windows. Inside, the world shrank to the fragile bubble between two men learning how to embrace a complicated, beautiful love that didn't fit neatly into any preconceived mold. Jasper's eyes searched Caleb's, those steady pools of green, finding something fierce and tender all at once. I'm scared, he admitted, voice cracking just a little, the weight of a lifetime trying to suppress these feelings pressing down. Caleb's hand slid from shoulder to cup Jasper's cheek, rough fingertips catching the faint stubble there. Me too, he said simply. But maybe being scared just means it's real. They stayed arrested between that vulnerability and the warmth blossoming beneath it, two souls grappling and reaching for trust, for love, for something better than either had dared to dream before. Jasper swallowed hard, then smiled again, that shy, hopeful smile that made Caleb's heart ache with longing and tenderness. No matter what happens, he murmured, I'm glad I came home to you. Caleb's answer was silent, the touch of his lips resting briefly on Jasper's temple, a pledge beyond words. The dawn had unfurled itself fully now, filling the apartment with light, a light that felt like the fragile, dazzling proof that a new beginning was possible. Together they leaned into that light, into the unknown, into the promise of all the moments yet to come, no longer just friends, no longer just soldiers of their own hidden battles. Just two men daring to rewrite their stories, hand in hand, ready at last to love, without apologies, fears, or restraints. And so they remained, caught in that rare, unguarded dawn, holding on, letting go, and stepping gently toward whatever future awaited them, one careful, hopeful heartbeat at a time. Jasper's voice was barely above a whisper, the words tasting fragile on his tongue, like they might shatter if spoken aloud. I was terrified, he admitted, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the sunlit window, where the city stirred in the soft hum of morning. Terrified of losing us, losing our friendship because of this. His hand trembled slightly, struggling to hold the weight of unspoken fears lingering between them. The confession hung there, vulnerable and raw, the kind that could either build a bridge or burn a bridge, and yet Caleb did not recoil. Instead, he reached deeper into that shared fear. I've been scared too, Caleb replied, voice steady, but laced with a quiet intensity. Not just scared of losing you, but scared of losing myself, if I keep denying what I feel. For so long, I tried to lock it away, to bury it beneath what I thought I had to be. But every time I did, a part of me, something real, faded a little more. I was afraid I'd never be whole again if I stayed silent. His hand returned to Jasper's face, thumb ghosting over the faint scar that marked his own journey, intertwining their histories in that small, intimate gesture. But maybe vulnerability isn't a weakness after all. Maybe it's the strongest thing there is. The words settled between them, a delicate truce forged out of fear and longing, inviting something new. Jasper's hazel eyes shimmered with unshed tears, his lips parting in a tentative smile that spoke of relief and hope mingled in equal measure. There was a quiet bravery in those moments, not the kind born from battles and commands, but the kind that comes from laying your soul bare to another person and trusting it won't be trampled. "I never thought I'd say that," Jasper murmured, voice trembling but sure. "But you're right. Vulnerability. It's the strength that gets us through, isn't it? The courage to be seen, truly seen." Caleb nodded, the sunlight catching the green in his eyes and making them blaze with newfound clarity. "Yeah. And I'm done running from it, from us, from me." He caught Jasper's hand in both of his own, warming the thin fingers between his palms. "Whatever comes, we face it together. No more hiding." Jasper's breath hitched, and he squeezed Caleb's hands gently, as if affirming their pact, not just with words, but with the quiet rhythm of shared heartbeat. "Together," he confirmed. The word was simple, but it carried the weight of all the nights spent wishing, all the moments lost to fear. It was a promise, a beginning. As the afternoon crept forward, the city outside continued its ceaseless pulse, but inside Caleb's apartment, time seemed to loosen its grip. They didn't need to rush, didn't need to fill the space with chatter or explanation. Instead, they settled into the comfortable silence that blossoms only between souls who know each other deeply. Jasper sat, curled on the worn couch, legs tucked beneath him, while Caleb leaned back against the armrest, his dark hair catching stray beams of sun that made it gleam with warm chestnut highlights. And the quiet was not empty, but full, with the soft hum of distant traffic, the faint scent of brewed coffee lingering in the air, and the subtle syncopation of breath and heartbeat between them. Each glance, each slight movement was a conversation in itself. Jasper's eyes traced the curve of Caleb's jaw, the scar that had once told stories of pain, now softened by light, and Caleb's gaze flickered to Jasper's dimpled smile, the gentle warmth behind the round lenses of his glasses. In this shared stillness, years of tension and unspoken words began to unravel, replaced by something tender and hopeful. The weight of past fears and doubts, which had once pressed so heavily upon their chests, lifted like dust, disturbed by a gentle breeze. It was as though the very air between them had shifted, thick with promise, but light with the ease of acceptance. Jasper's voice finally broke the quiet. "Being here with you, it feels like coming home in a way I didn't know I needed." There was a trace of wonder in his tone, as if he was rediscovering a part of himself that had been lost in the chaos of deployments and self-denial. Caleb's smile was slow and genuine, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and softened the hard edges of his jaw. "I get that." He reached out and brushed a hand over Jasper's hair, the grainy texture as tangible as the connection sparking between them. "No matter where I've been or what I've done, this feels right. And that's what matters." The afternoon waned into a tender quietude, the kind where time slips unnoticed and two people simply exist together in a bubble of fragile peace. There was no need for declarations or answers, no pressure to define what lay ahead, just the simple act of being, two hearts, tentative yet unburdened, finding solace in proximity. When evening approached, the golden light spilled through the blinds at a gentler angle, casting stripes across the floor like whispered secrets. Caleb turned to Jasper with a seriousness that belied the ease settling over them, his voice low and intimate. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being my anchor, for not turning away even when things got complicated, when I got complicated." Jasper's eyes softened, the dimple in his cheek deepening as he squeezed Caleb's hand with a tenderness that spoke volumes. "You're my anchor, too," he replied, his voice steady despite the vulnerability coursing just beneath the surface. "I don't have all the answers. Hell, I don't know what this is exactly, and I don't know where it's going, but I want to find out. With you, Caleb's breath caught at the raw honesty, a flicker of warmth blossoming in his chest that ebbed away the lingering shadows of doubt. Me too, he said. No rush. No expectations. He traced small circles on Jasper's hand with his thumb, grounding himself in the steady pulse beneath his fingertips. Just us. Here, where it counts. There was a quiet strength in accepting the unknown together, a silent agreement to embrace uncertainty without the fear that had haunted them for so long. In this shared space, love was patient, tentative, and patient, weaving its subtle thread through the fabric of their lives. As twilight deepened into evening, casting a soft blue haze over the city, Caleb surprised himself when he spoke the words that had hovered on the horizon all day. "I'm going to stay," he said simply. The declaration wasn't a grand gesture, but a quiet decision, the first step toward a future that hadn't been written yet, but which both of them were willing to face. Jasper's eyes lit up with something close to relief, his smile quiet but radiant. The prospect of more time together, more shared moments, was a balm for their aching vulnerabilities. "I'm glad you're staying," he said. "This feels right." They moved through the ritual of preparing for bed in companionable silence, finding comfort in the mundane acts as much as the extraordinary. Caleb stripped off his shirt, revealing the lean muscles shaped by years of discipline and quiet battles. Jasper set out fresh clothes, the small details weaving the threads of intimacy that only years of friendship could foster. Neither of them felt the need to fill the space with words. There was a language in the way their hands brushed as they changed blankets, in the way their eyes met and lingered, in the subtle expressions that spoke of trust grown over sleepless nights and whispered confessions. It was a communication deeper than speech, a shared understanding that whatever came next, they were no longer alone. When at last they slipped beneath the covers, side by side, the warmth radiating between them was not just physical, but a sanctuary from the fears that had haunted them for so long. Caleb's arm draped lightly over Jasper's waist, a protective, tender gesture. Jasper's head rested near Caleb's shoulder, inhaling the steady rhythm of breath and beating heart that promised safety. They lay there, the quiet city light filtering through the curtains, wrapped in the fragile cocoon of newfound love and patient hope. Tomorrow was unwritten, and that was okay. There was no urgency, no demand for definitions or declarations, just the gentle certainty that they had found in each other a rare kind of home. Caleb's eyes fluttered, closed thoughts slowing, peace settling over his mind like a soft blanket. Somewhere, deep inside, the scarred pieces of himself mended a little more. The part that had been shattered by fear and silence was stitching itself back together in the presence of this man who had quietly become everything. Jasper lay awake a moment longer, tracing Caleb's jawline with his eyes, committing this quiet, tender intimacy to memory, the curve of his mouth, the slight furrow of his brow relaxing in sleep's embrace, the beat of his heart in steady rhythm with his own. Love was no longer something whispered in shadows, but a quiet dawn breaking across the horizon of their lives. And as the night wrapped them in its soft embrace, two soldiers, no longer just fighting the battles outside, but those within, drifted towards sleep, side by side, their hands entwined, hope blooming quietly between them, like a fragile flower reaching for the light.